The Australian Financial Review.
Do you have a goal outside of work?
Gosh, am I just going to sit here and work for the next 40 years and really look for things like, what could I do? What could I achieve? There's something about it that kind of is yours and keeps you stimulated, keeps you learning, gives you some direction in addition to your current workload.
Welcome to 15 Minutes with the Boss, a podcast about success, failure, and all the lessons learnt along the way. I'm your host, Sally Patton, and my guest today is Esther Colwill, the Asia-Pacific President and Country Head for Australia at global talent consulting firm Korn Ferry. Founded in 1969, the firm also provides executive search services to find top-level execs and board members. Thanks so much for coming in today, Esther. It's lovely to see you.
It's great to be here.
Now, we've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to start the clock right now. Tell me about your morning routine. What time do you get up? Do you run half a marathon before breakfast?
In the morning, I do what most wellness gurus would tell you not to do. So I get a cup of coffee and I check my emails. Because my company's headquartered in the US, so lots of things come in overnight. And I just want to keep an eye and see if there's anything I need to know before I start my day. And then I wrestle the kids up, get them off to school, and then it's either off to the office or a day of Zoom if I'm working from home.
So what time does this all start? What time do you get up?
Oh, before 6. Between 5 and 6 every day.
And then you're making kids breakfast and getting their lunches organised?
No lunches. That's at the school. Let the schools deal with that. They're pretty resilient these days. They make their own breakfast if they want it or not. It is nicer now that they're older and much more independent.
And do you have coffee and breakfast yourself?
I do. Love coffee all day long if I could, but I try and limit it to 3 a day. Breakfast also. Just something light though. Yogurt, granola. Love it.
My next question is about your career trajectory. Has there been a pivotal moment, for example, a promotion you were given, that changed the whole nature of what you were doing?
Yes, there's been a couple. The most pivotal was when I had my twins about 13 years ago. I was a partner with Deloitte, and typically partners in Deloitte in America would be traveling Monday to Thursday every week. And I just couldn't figure out really how to continue doing what I love doing, which is really client work. You know, I could have gone to kind of take an internal position, but I wanted to keep doing client work. And this company called Genpact approached me. They're largely India-based, very innovative. They're an outsourcing provider, now very much on the front end of AI. Said, will you help us build the consulting part of our business? And you can hire any way you like. You can be as flexible and work whatever hours you want. We don't even have an office in San Francisco. And at the time, that really worked for me. It gave me kind of a flexibility to do what I wanted, but also look after the kids and also experience a very different business culture to what I'd been used to for the last 10 to 15 years.
So you didn't have to travel in that new job?
I did travel. It wasn't as rigid as the Monday to Thursday. I would be able to kind of be at home for 3 weeks, then plan a longer trip. And I was able to take better control, frankly, of the travel aspect of it.
So why was that move pivotal? What did you learn going to work for Genpact that you might perhaps not have learned had you stayed at Deloitte?
Certainly, I think Deloitte has a wonderful learning culture and had really taught me everything I knew professionally up until my early 30s. Going to a different company, I was suddenly exposed to a whole different environment. Genpact is much more spontaneous, quick, much more technology-driven. And again, the kind of the influence of Indian culture is very strong in there. And so adapting actually as a Westerner, working predominantly in a Western environment, to working with an Indian boss who was based in Delhi and still remains one of the smartest people I've ever met, was a big change. And it was fascinating and I loved it.
So did you have to make decisions more quickly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was less of a linear process, if you like. You know, a lot of professional services and a lot of companies have strong processes that are there for good reason. Smaller, younger companies often are much more spontaneous. And so you have to kind of roll with it. Even if you spent a while putting something together, suddenly direction changes, you have to drop it. So it was really great training, I would say.
Has that mental agility helped you in what you've done ever since?
I think so. I think it's helped because I've learned not to hang on to things too hard. A picture I might paint if you've seen those beautiful mandalas that they build in India or in the Himalayas with sand or with flowers, and they put them there and they're beautiful and they take days and lots of expertise, and then they sweep them away with the idea that you shouldn't get too attached to it. And so that idea of being passionately involved but being able to then let it go and non-attached has been a powerful lesson. And I think that's important because the business environment we're in right now, and have been in, frankly, since COVID, is very volatile. It changes quickly. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so I think most executives need agility.
And to not become attached to the current environment or their current projects or their current decisions.
Yes, or we used to do this 5 years ago, we've done this for 10 years. It just may not be relevant anymore.
My next question is about career advice. What's the best piece of career advice you've ever been given?
Oh, well, one of my mentors shared advice that he had been given, and I love this advice. It's the best advice for getting a good night's sleep, if nothing else. And it's 3 things. It's number 1, do the right thing. We all know what that is, and that's the small decisions you might make about how to treat somebody or bigger decisions. It's look after your team, and it's play the long game. And so there's 3 principles, if you like, around how you construct your day.
So how do you play the long game?
I think that's really about not fighting every battle. You know, we're all passionate about what we do. We have a view around what will work better than others, and others will have a different view. Sometimes you have to really go to bat for an idea or a person. And sometimes it's like, well, let's let this one go. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, or maybe now is not the time.
So really choose the things where you have real conviction.
Yes.
Rather than fighting everything.
Rather than fighting everything. And preserving the relationships. Relationships last forever in careers. And you know, if you're going to fight everything, you're definitely not going to win. And I think there is going to be a damage to key relationships.
Esther, stay where you are. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, you pick the questions. I'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to 15 Minutes with the Boss. I'm here with Esther Colwill, the country head for Australia at global talent consulting firm Korn Ferry. Now, Esther, in front of you is a somewhat scruffy cardboard box with about 20 random questions inside. For this next section, I'm going to ask you to pick out a question one at a time. What is a piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
I would say, don't send emails when you're mad.
Yes. Have you ever done that?
Definitely I have done that. And it always backfires, and it's never a fair conversation. And plenty of us do it, but I would say, you know, over the benefit of time, I do not send emails angry. I will really try and wait and just call and have a conversation or a face-to-face.
And do you wait even before you make that call?
Yep, absolutely. Usually overnight.
And can you recall a time where you sent an email too hastily?
Yes.
And something blew up? And what happened?
So actually, this was with Genpact when we were bidding for something and I was getting too frustrated, sent a note about the direction and how we weren't going to win, whatnot. And then my boss gave me a call and said, Esther, that wasn't appropriate. You're not serving yourself. And he pulled me off the client and he put me on somewhere else. So it blew up for me personally. And then off they went without me. So it was a hard learning.
And you were bidding for another company at the time?
Yeah.
So clearly that has stuck in your mind for a long, long time.
It has, yeah. Because it didn't matter whether I was right or wrong. Really. It really didn't matter. And they went on and they bid and I think they won it anyway. But just not spending the time to listen and not appropriately communicating my perspective that might have helped or hurt the team.
And instead you just sent that sort of huffy-puffy
yes,
email.
Exactly.
Right, okay. It's a good thing to remember. Have another fish in the box? Do you like public speaking and have you always liked it?
I am okay with public speaking, but I absolutely have not always liked it. I would say I learned how to do it better after I climbed the 7 summits. And the 7 summits are the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents. And this was a mountaineering goal I set for myself in younger years and achieved, although Now, in my 50s, I look back and wonder how on earth I did all the training and did them.
So can you name the 7 summits for us?
Certainly, yeah. Okay, so in Africa, you have Kilimanjaro. In Australia, you have Kosciuszko. That's a tough one right there. Of course, you have Everest in Asia. You have Vinson Massif in Antarctica, Aconcagua in South America, McKinley in North America, or Denali in Alaska, and you have Elbrus in Russia.
Okay, so you have climbed all 7.
So part of being able to do that was getting some sponsorship. And after I was successful, there was a lot of call for speaking engagements. And so I had to learn how to do that. And one of the things I was surprised at is how to find the answer when someone not only wants to ask you about your experience, but they want to ask you how you felt about it. They want to ask you how you trained for it. And having to say that in a public forum was quite scary. I did have a coach, which was fantastic. I'm very thankful. And I remember the first time I had a big audience was to a group of the Canadian partners, and I was a manager. There's about 700 of them. I would say probably 80% men. And I was rather glad to come out of the end of that saying, gosh, Esther, how did you make that 700 group of men cry?
So what was the secret to becoming comfortable with public speaking?
I wouldn't say that I'm comfortable, but I do think I'm not easily intimidated as I might have been. I think it's preparation. I think it's knowing what you want to talk about and to some extent just being confident in who you are and be okay if you make a mistake or you fumble over something. The audience knows, they know you're a human and you just kind of move on from it.
And so with the 7 peaks, when did you decide that you were going to climb all of those?
So I grew up in East Africa, actually, and I climbed Kilimanjaro in Tanzania when I was young. And that started the journey. And then I always loved athletics. At Oxford, I rowed. I'm an Oxford Blue for rowing, which helped really build the athletic discipline and, frankly, the physical strength that you need, particularly in the upper body, that as a woman you need for climbing. And then I started work and I was like, well, gosh, am I just going to sit here and work for the next 40 years? And really looked for things like, what could I do? What could I achieve? I knew I loved the mountains. So one by one, I started climbing and I went to Aconcagua next. I went to Elbrus after that. And then pretty soon, the idea of the 7 summits was there. It was lesser known back there as idea. And so set that as a goal. And I was fortunate in that 6 out of 7, I managed to climb the first time round.
Including Everest.
McKinley in Alaska was harder and took me 3 separate tries, actually.
So lots of questions arise out of this, but do you think there was a benefit for you work-wise in having another really large goal outside of work that was completely different? Did that somehow, do you think, help you in your career as well?
I think it absolutely did. And I would encourage, especially younger professionals, to always keep something outside of work. And in fact, not just younger professionals, any age professional. There's something about it that kind of is yours and keeps you stimulated, keeps you learning, gives you something to be proud of, gives you some direction in addition to your current workload. Now, that gets tricky when you've got children or you're looking after parents or other pieces in one's life. But carving out something for yourself, I think, is really important.
I love that. It's great advice. Have another fish in the box.
Okay.
What is a common piece of work or life advice that you think is bullshit?
Ooh. I do think work-life balance is an idea that is past its time. I think it was built on a time where you would go to the office 9 to 5 and then you would settle down and somehow mentally not think about it and do other things. I think these days the way we work is much more fluid and it has its benefits and detriments. But to me, my work is always there and my personal life is always there. One thing doesn't switch off when you're in one place versus another. So that's kind of the mental load, if you like, around balance. You know, just because you're somewhere physically doesn't mean that you're not engaged in other places mentally.
So how do you think about work-life balance?
I think about it as, you know, when I look at my day and I look at my schedule, how I spend my time. And I think with everybody, it comes back to how do you spend your time and how much of that time do you spend on your work? How much do you spend on you, yourself, and your health? And how much do you spend on family or other commitments or community? And that's the balance. And every individual will have their idea of what the ideal balance is. And it may change over the course of a career as well. But I think every individual is kind of responsible for how they look at that balance and what they choose.
What does your ideal work-life balance look like at this very moment between, say, work, looking after yourself and being with your family and friends? What percentages are you looking for?
I would say, kind of Monday to Friday, work really does take priority. I may be out for dinners a couple of evenings a week, so I won't see the children every night, but I'll pretty much see them every morning, and I may see them most evenings as well. Weekends, I work very little, unless I really have to, or there's something that's an emergency, but that's been very, very rare. And so I have a pretty high bar around weekends and time with the children and, prioritizing going to sports matches or just spending time hanging out, watching Netflix. I would say the one piece that is harder is actually time for me, and I think most working parents would find this, particularly around exercise. I've loved training and doing exercise, and it is harder to fit that in. One of my favorites, I do Ashtanga yoga, which is a great form of yoga. I try and do it at least 3 times a week. I try and do some other pieces, but I can tell you it's the first thing to go when there's a time crunch.
So you have to be prepared that is the first thing that you'll lose and be comfortable with that.
That's right. Yep. In my choice, that's the lowest of the priorities. Yep.
I've now got one final question, Esther, and that is, if for some reason you weren't the country head of Korn Ferry, what would you be doing?
I would open a little coffee shop in a small town in the Canadian Rockies, and I would make delicious coffees and pastries all day long and then go hiking on the weekends. I have the place picked out.
And why the Canadian Rockies? Is that the best mountain climbing or the best walking you can do globally?
It's where I spent a solid 10 years as a manager and did a lot of my training before Everest and McKinley and the others. And I would say I know those mountains like the back of my hand, and I love them up there.
I love that. Sounds great. I wish you all the best on your new life, if that comes to pass. Thank you, Esther, so much for allowing us to spend 15 minutes with the boss. It's been great.
Thanks, Sally.
And thank you to everyone for listening. If you like the podcast and you want to hear more, consider sharing the podcast or writing a review, as it helps us to reach more people. And follow us wherever you get your podcasts. At the Financial Review, we investigate the big stories about markets, business and power. For more, go to afr.com. And you can subscribe to the Financial Review, the daily habit of successful people, at afr.com/subscribe. This podcast was hosted by me, Sally Patton, produced by Iona Rennie. Our theme is by Alex Gow, and our executive producer is Fiona Buffini. See you next week.
The Australian Financial Review.